After his father's death, a man is going through a hard time. He eventually goes on some weird sites and finds a website called U-Chan. On the site, he finds a bunch of strange categories to click on, including necrophilia. He clicks on one of them and receives a message. The message was a picture of his father's dead body dug up and left by his grave. The odd thing was, the picture was posted 5 minutes in the future. The man ran to the graveyard and found his father's corpse right where it was in the picture. After such a traumatizing experience, he decides to return to the site sometime later. This time, he received a video message of his mom tied up to a bed and being raped. This one was posted 2 weeks in the future. Terrified, he called his mom and the police, neither of which believed his story. The creepypasta ends stating that 2 weeks later, his mother went missing. A man tells the story of a paranormal experience he had when he was staying at his brother's place. One night, he heard something outside his window. The next night, something came through the window. He woke up that morning with a huge gash on his cheek, so his brother rushed him to the hospital. There, the doctor finds a sewn-up incision where his kidney once was. He was mortified and confused. He returned home, but the following night he awoke to see the creature responsible staring at him. When the man got a picture of him, the creature jumped on him and tried to rip out his lungs. He manages to escape and flees into the woods where he passes out. He awoke in the hospital. The doctor tells him that his brother was murdered that night. When he returns to the house to collect his belongings, he sees the creature hung over his brother's corpse. He grabs something he saw on the ground without looking and runs out of the house. When he sees what he had grabbed, he realizes it was his half-eaten kidney. Mario, all caps, was a ROM hack of Super Mario World discovered by a man that shows the darker side of the Mario franchise. The man who discovered it was named Adam, of no relation to me, of course, along with a strange wall of jumbled text. The only recognizable word in it was the words, "Find me." When he starts the game, nothing seems off, until the first text box appears, saying Mario is at it again. Adam interprets it as meaning Mario is the villain of the game. As he continues playing, the levels' names were not the same as in the original game. There were no enemies or music, and more text boxes were changed to say creepy things, like, "I hate you." And this is the selfish way out. From the text boxes, he was able to figure out that in this game, Mario is the bad guy that goes to hell for torturing Yoshi. After he defeats the first boss and Mario destroys the castle, the text says, "Victim number 1, eyeballs were unable to be found. The victim was found lying on her carpet. Causes of death unknown. Hand marks with unidentified fingerprints were found all over the corpse." It is later that Adam deciphers the text to reveal it was an image of this.
Mario!
This creepypasta is based on a Japanese urban legend about a man who checks into a hotel. The lady at the front desk warns him not to disturb a certain room. The man says yes, but eventually he gets curious and peeks into the keyhole of that room. He sees a pale woman in the corner of the room. The man goes on to do something else, but returns to that room's keyhole. He is surprised to see nothing but red inside the room now. Confused, he returns to the lady at the front desk and says he looked inside. She explains that the ghost of the woman that used to live in that room is said to haunt it, and that the woman was reported as being pale and having red eyes. This creepypasta tells about the Ronald McDonald house, but not the charity one. The wrong Ronald McDonald's houses. The ones that are in every city, but there are no signs or windows on the buildings. So the only way to find them is to be taken there. A teen tells the story of when he went to the wrong Ronald McDonald house. He was a foster child that was placed in the wrong one by mistake by his caseworker. All the nurses there had their faces painted like Ronald McDonald and red wigs. They all smiled. When the caseworker left him there, they grabbed him and strapped him to a gurney and wheeled him down a white hallway while laughing hysterically. He is drugged and wakes up in a dungeon-like room with no windows and wearing only a Ronald McDonald robe. He looks through his scrapbook of his foster families to find that all the pictures of them were replaced with images of them brutally murdered, along with pictures of his dead caseworker. On the back were the words, "You never existed." The kid uses a pin in his bag to pick the door and escape down the halls. He hears children screaming coming from various rooms. He even witnesses children hooked up to machines having their blood sucked out. A siren goes off and an army of Ronald McDonald nurses start chasing him. He finally escapes the Ronald McDonald house and finds himself in a deserted part of town. He looks up to see the glow of a neon McDonald's sign. He sits down on the bench with the Ronald McDonald statue, thinking he's safe, when from the corner of his eyes, he sees the statue's head turn and begin laughing. On the site Omegle, where you can video chat with strangers, a girl decides to try it. Unlike the normal terrifying things you see on the site, like ugly people jacking it, the girl finds a creepy pale old man with dark eyes and a creepy smile. The man just stared at her. The girl was creeped out, so she disconnected, hoping to find someone else. To her horror, she found the old man again. This time, the man seemed very angry with her and continued to stare at her. She disconnected again, and the screen stayed black. The old man appeared to her again. She tries it again and again, only to find his face staring back at her each time. This time, he pulled out a plate and scissors and made a crappy-looking mask to cover his face. Before the girl closed out of Omegle, he typed one word: "Wait," before she saw a camera flash. An overweight man who has an addiction to online video games is woken up from his trance by his computer not working. He starts furiously searching for his phone within the garbage he's hoarded so he can call a repairman. He begins to try to remember what has happened while he was distracted playing the game. He remembers his wife and kid, but continues searching for the phone. He remembers there's one in the bedroom, but it is blocked by trash. He pushes it aside and forces his way into the undisturbed room, only to find his wife and child dead. They were trapped in the bedroom when all the man's trash fell and blocked the door. The man remembers now, then grabs the phone to call the repairman, closing the door behind him. Two friends, Annie and David, are up late one night texting each other on a chat site. The conversation is normal until Annie tells David she sees someone through her window in her garden. She begins to freak out when she sees it looks like David. David assures her it's not him. She sees that he's wearing David's favorite jacket that has David's name on it. David checks his closet, but the jacket is still there. Annie texts him saying it saw her, and that now it's coming. There's a long pause. She texts him saying that it's in her house, so now she's hiding in her closet. She hears it calling out her name in a demonic voice. It's going up the stairs. It's in the hallway. It's in the room. Annie tells David that the creature has something to do with him, so he tells her how he feels about her. She says the creature is gone. David tells her not to leave the closet till the cops come. She tells him that she wants to see him and asks him to come over the next day. David says he will. But wait. He asks Annie, "How do I know this is you?" Annie, 96, went offline. An urban legend junkie recounts the time his cool teacher told his class a spooky story on Halloween. Now, being a person who told a lot of urban legends around the campfire, he knew if a story someone told was true or not by how the person acted while telling it. That's why he knew his teacher's story was true. The story goes that his teacher, Mr. Mays, and his two friends were on a road trip and got lost trying to find his friend's grandpa's house. They ended up in the middle of nowhere and came across an abandoned Shiloh. The friends were looking for a place to stay, so they entered, only to be hit with a putrid stench. The friends go down a flight of stairs. On a search for the smell, they find a dark, long hallway with a red door at the end. His friends knocked the door and jokingly asked, "Is anyone home?" Just then, the lights flicked off, and a piece of scrap metal from the roof fell and sliced his friend's head, causing blood to drip down his face. Suddenly, the lights turned on, and before them were tens of people. They were children, but their hair was long, and they were filthy like they haven't showered since birth. They heard the sounds of an animal squealing. Then the kids began to approach them. Mr. Mays grabbed his friend, and he searched for a wall to lean on and grabbed a shower handle. His friends and him escaped, and he advised all the kids to be careful on Halloween. But the way he ended the story made the urban legend junkie very suspicious. In college, he happens to run into Mr. Mays at a bar and asks about the story and how his friend is doing. That's when Mr. Mays tells him the truth. His friend didn't make it. The children grabbed him and pulled him into that room, and his body was never found. But that didn't stop the college kid from wanting to find the place himself. At a gas station, a new employee has been causing issues for one of the workers. The man they suspect is called Jeremy. Things were disappearing in the gas station, so Jeremy's co-worker assumes it must be him stealing. His boss tells the co-worker that an entire shipment of motor oil just vanished, so the co-worker reviews the security cam. Usual customers come by, but he's surprised to see at 5:03 the tape seems to repeat. Then, at 6:03, the same customers returned. Each time, their movements and purchases were exactly the same. Every hour, it was the same. He continues watching until Jeremy locked up and went outside to his car. The man fast forwards until 12:03. Jeremy's face just appeared on the camera looking at him. For one frame, Jeremy's face was there, and then gone. Using another camera angle, the man checks 12:03 to see if he could see how Jeremy got back inside the gas station to put his face against the camera. But instead of seeing Jeremy, he sees the motor oil vanish at 12:03 in one frame. He shows the tapes to his boss, and the two have no idea what to do about it. The Creepypasta thread gets an update every hour saying the same thing. Jeremy isn't answering his phone. We're calling the police. The author tries to figure out what's going on. He realizes that he and his boss are in a time loop, and it seems they, along with Jeremy, are the only people who noticed it. The boss calls the police, but when the police go to Jeremy's address, they realize the house was burnt down in 1993. Arson was the cause of the fire, because motor oil was spilled all around the house. The man goes downstairs one night and sees FBI agents in his home. They question him, and when it's all over they say, "Christ, we have another one on our hands." And they tell him to sign some papers promising not to tell anyone. So, he hurries off to work. His boss tells him to check the security tapes. He suspects the new guy, Jeremy, has been stealing motor oil. As you know, the deep web is the home of many disturbing sights and videos, but none more disturbing than the site normal porn for normal people. The site, though with a misleading title, is actually a site for people who get off on the most fucked up shit. The video people who visited the site talk the most about is the one where a woman is tied to a bed and a red-colored ape-like creature tears her apart as she screams in agony. So, resist the urge to fap. Abandoned by Disney is a story about a man who goes on a quest to find the abandoned Disney park. When he gets there, he sees the park in disarray, rides destroyed, and nature trying to take the park back. When he enters the old dressing room, he finds an old Mickey Mouse costume lying on the floor. But the suit was actually a negative of a Mickey Mouse costume. When he turns back to look at it, he sees it standing up beside him. It spoke. "Want to see my head come off?" It then ripped its head off, and it squirted foul-smelling yellow liquid from the suit. The man ran away, but when he looked back, he saw the words, "Abandoned by God," written on the wall. A couple is hiking when they come across God's Mouth, a forbidden cave. The couple entered. It was odd that no matter how far they went forward, the flashlight never could see the end of the cave in front, like it never ended. The wife bickered that she didn't want to be there, but the two find it's too late. Even though they had been going only straight, they find themselves lost. The husband bangs his head on the ceiling. They turn back and see the cave is somehow closing in. When he goes on ahead, he realizes he somehow hit a corner. He lost his wife somehow. He turns to look for her and hits another corner. He was now surrounded by walls, no entrance and no exit. He hears his wife's muffled screams through the rocks. The walls shrink further until the four walls begin to pierce the man's skin. As his flashlight begins to die, he sees his wife's hand being chewed up and swallowed by the God's Mouth. ANNORA Petrova was an ice skater who looked herself up one day and found this Wikipedia page on her. On the wiki, though, it said she won first place in a competition she hadn't yet won. When she competed in the skating competition, she won first place, like the wiki had said. So, with another skating competition coming up, she decides to change her wiki to say she won it too. Well, she shouldn't have done that, because the wiki changed to say ANNORA Petrova is gonna die an ugly, friendless orphan. At the competition, her face was cut by a skate. The judges accused her of cheating. Her parents died, and she desperately tries to convince her last friend about her story. She sends her the Wikipedia page article, where it now says she was going to die that day. Well, her friend looks at the Wikipedia page, which is now changed, to read this. After World War II, supplies were short and food was scarce in Berlin. A woman is asked by a blind man if she could drop a letter off at a certain address. The woman agrees, but is confused when she witnesses the blind man run away and disappear in the crowd. She went to the police, who checked out the address written on the letter. 3 butchers were killing people to sell their meat to starving people. In the letter the woman received, it read, "This is the last one I'm sending you today." "Have you seen my son?" A woman runs all around the neighborhood screaming if anyone's seen her son. She tries everyone. Neighbors, police, no one. No one has seen her son. The woman smiles. "Good. I guess I hid the body well." A man with a large imagination agrees to participate in a 6-month psychological study. All he had to do to get paid was sit in a room with sensors on his head and imagine a double of himself. A tulpa. At first, nothing really happened until visualizing his double became second nature to him. He began interacting with his tulpa. What was odd was the tulpa was able to remember things he couldn't. The man thought it was cool to call upon his subconscious to remember things from years prior. The man began calling his tulpa even when he wasn't being studied, in his spare time. It became hard not to see his tulpa anymore. The man began to have problems communicating with people. Now that he had a tulpa, he was able to converse with himself all the time, while other people he saw were too unsure of themselves. One day, when in a dispute with his friend, the tulpa ordered him to fight him. His tulpa just smiled and complimented him on his fighting. It wasn't until the next morning that he realized it was his tulpa that made him want to do it. He felt guilty, but his tulpa told him he didn't need anyone anymore. The man told the researchers that the tulpa was trying to take over, but they laughed it off. The tulpa smiled when they did. The man became scared of his tulpa, and now that he visualized him automatically, it was hard to stop seeing him. He was able to make him vanish for a while, but he would always come back angry and more monstrous in appearance. One day, the researchers grabbed him and tied him down, forcing him to visualize his tulpa once again. His monstrous tulpa appeared. Now, he couldn't be destroyed. Now, his tulpa was able to affect the physical world. His tulpa would hurt him while he was tied up. Eventually, he began telling him that he was going to kill everyone he loved. And then he left. The man escaped and stumbled home. He called the police on the scientists, but they were unable to be found. He gets a call from his mom one day. His sister was another victim of a serial killer. While at her funeral, he hears the sound that steadily gets closer. A man was lost in the woods one night. He comes across a cabin and decides to spend the night. He goes to sleep, but has difficulties staying asleep. There's also this unsettling old portrait across the room that seemed to just stare at him as he was lying there. But eventually, he stays asleep until the morning, only to notice something terrifying. There was no portrait, only a window. A single father is inside one day while his son is outside playing. The father hears his son talking with someone. When his son comes back inside, the father asks, "Who are you speaking with?" His son replies he met a new friend named Laughing Jack. Laughing Jack was a black and white clown with a cone nose that was always smiling. The father figured it was an imaginary friend. That night, the father has a nightmare about being at an abandoned carnival with the eerie song of Pop Goes the Weasel playing. The father is then surrounded by disfigured children that rip him apart while an evil laugh echoes over him. He wakes up thinking it was just a messed up dream. When his son goes out to play, the father passes out and wakes up 2 hours later. When he goes into the backyard, his son is gone. The father finds him in the front yard eating candy. When asked who gave him the candy, he said Laughing Jack. His father tells him that Laughing Jack isn't real and to throw the candy out. That night, the father hears banging, so he goes downstairs to find the kitchen is tore up, with their pet hung and stuffed with candy. And when he goes upstairs, his son is cowering in the corner. He tells his dad Laughing Jack did it. The father takes his son to their neighbors, and when they go to sleep that night, he hears a static coming from the baby monitor. He rushes in his son's room to find him nailed to the wall with his entrails pulled out of him. Then Laughing Jack appears to the father, laughing. The father pulls out his knife to stab him, but the knife goes through him, and instead he stabs his son. The story ends with him saying he's doing well in a hospital for the clinically insane. But now, he keeps hearing Pop Goes the Weasel outside his window. This is one of my personal favorite gaming creepypastas. It goes above and beyond the cliches of many stories and provides actual proof with screenshots. A man gets a Godzilla 64 cartridge and is about to play it on his old N64, but notices some things are not quite right. It looks different than when he played it as a child. There's a creature named Red that shows up to chase Godzilla down in each level. The creature is ruthless and takes many forms. This creepypasta is very long, but I'll just say that the final battle with Red is suspenseful and epic, and if you haven't, you should go read it for yourself. During wartime in a foreign country, a writer remembers watching a horrible kids show called Where the Bad Kids Go. The show was about kids getting brutally punished for not behaving properly. The closing scene of the show was always the same in each episode, with the camera zooming in on an old rusted door. As it got closer, screams could be heard, coming from the other side. The writer now wished to find the location. When he traveled to the abandoned studio, he found the door, and when he opened it, he found bloodstains, feces, and the bones of children across the floor. And the most frightening thing was the microphone that was bolted to the ceiling. The Footsteps is one of many stories in the Pen Pal series, but I honestly only read this one. It tells the story of an only child who was living in a small, low-income house with his mom. He would often hear footsteps at night, imagine monsters in the basement, and even find himself waking up on the bottom bunk, even though he slept on the top bunk. The boy never thought much of it until one night he awoke to the sounds of footsteps. But that wasn't the odd part. He had awoken outside, in the woods. He thought it must have been a bad dream, but he couldn't wake up. He decided to find his way out of the woods. He was lost, not knowing where these woods were. He then realized that he was where he had just woken up, even though he had walked for hours. However, he eventually finds a familiar part of the woods and is able to make his way out and find his home. He can see all the lights are on in his house. As he's about to open his door, he's pulled back by someone. The door opens, and he sees that it isn't his mother in the house, but a big man. He tried to fight to get away until he heard his mom's voice tell him to calm down. He sees that he is in fact being held by his mother, and that the man was actually just a cop. His mother told him that she didn't want him to run away again. The boy looked confused. The cop hands him a letter that the boy wrote saying he was unhappy and didn't want to see his friends or his mom again. There was no way he could have sleepwalked out of that house and into the woods, and had also written a letter. He then realized that the runaway note had his name misspelt. There is supposedly a deep website that shows a live show of people killing themselves in different ways. The way the person kills themselves is judged by 3 judges who don't appear very impressed. The show is hosted by a woman who introduces each contestant while nervously smiling. Many contestants competed in the suicide show, but at one point a man pulls out a shotgun and blows his brains out, and the woman host was too disgusted to read her lines. It runs off camera, possibly to vomit. The show ended and hasn't been found since. A woman buys some scary movie online from a less than reputable site. The movie was called The Visiting. Her boyfriend is not very happy for putting her personal information on the site. But their night continues. While sitting on the couch, the couple sees someone with a knife breaking into their house. They escape and call the police. The police arrive later, but eventually catch the intruder. The man had a knife on his person, along with a video camera. One day, a kid's friend didn't show up to school. The kid wondered where his friend was, so he went to his house. When he got there, he received a message from his absent friend on his phone saying, "Please come." The boy wrote back, "What's up? Why weren't you at school today?" After getting no reply, the boy hopped on his bike and pedaled to the house. When he gets there, he finds the door to his friend's house unlocked and open. And when he looks inside, he sees blood all over the walls and floors, along with the dead body of his friend. The kid calls the cops on his phone. When the cops investigate, they find bloody footprints leading out through the back door, along with the body of his friend's parents. It was determined that since the blood was dried, the murders took place the night before. The Russian sleep experiment was apparently a secret experiment during World War II in Russia. Scientists wanted to test the results of depriving humans of sleep for long periods of time, using a new kind of gas. 5 Russian prisoners were used during the experiment, with the promise that if they remained awake for a month, they would be set free. After being in the chamber for weeks, the inmates became insane, eating their own flesh, ripping themselves apart, acting absolutely animalistic. The scientists called off the experiment. Only 2 initially survived, but the other died later. The last one was about to be killed by one of the scientists. Before he did, he asked, "What the hell are you?" The creature replied,
"Have you forgotten so easily? We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at any moment in your deepest animal minds. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralyze when you go to your nocturnal haven where we cannot tread."
The scientist fired his gun, and the creature said,
"So nearly free."
It's the start of a zombie apocalypse. A tanker spilled, causing animals to become infected and bite humans, which in turn made them bite other humans. Eventually, the outbreak reaches a man's apartment. He looks out the window and sees what's making the moans and screams, and accidentally locks eyes with one of the creatures. The creature then attempts to break into his room, so the man hides in his bathroom. But the zombie knew he was in there and tries to break down the door. When that fails, it tries mental tactics. Instead of moaning and screaming like they would normally do, they began to speak to him. "Why don't you open the door? We've come for you. You'll be happier if you open the door. It's not so bad." After 2 days, the man is starting to think about opening that door. Maybe it won't be so bad after all. A couple was driving their car when they see a little girl standing in the middle of the road. She then runs off. The couple were confused and kept driving. They then see a man running on the road. He asks them if they've seen his daughter. They tell him she ran off and pointed out the location. He thanks them, then takes off. The next morning, they are reading the newspaper and see the picture of the little girl. Apparently, she was brutally murdered. It then occurs to the couple that the man wasn't her father at all. A man wakes up in the middle of nowhere with no knowledge of who he is. He is surprised to see an old woman standing beside him. She says, "And what is your third wish?" The man, confused of what she means, says he wishes he knew who he was. The old woman laughs. The man asks why, and the old hag says, "It's funny. That was your first wish." A cam girl was documenting her one-on-one clients. In one of her private sessions, her client told her to strip naked, but his webcam showed just a black screen. Something moved away from the screen to show another naked lady lying on her stomach. She appeared to be chained up with her hair over her face. Behind her, the cam girl could see a man in a black mask standing over her. The woman on the bed screams, "Oh God, he's coming." The cam girl ends the session and is too freaked out to continue. She doesn't see the man until a week later. The man in the black mask shows up again for a private session with a different name. Again, he asks her to strip naked. This time his feed is of a poorly lit room. She can make out a closet door, and when she asks if anyone's there, the closet door suddenly opens with a loud bang, and the man in the mask comes out masturbating. She again hears a woman scream, "Oh God, he's coming." The cam girl's boyfriend receives 2 texts from her one day. The first said, "I think someone is following me." And the second one says, "Oh God, he's coming." This is one of my favorite lost episode creepypastas. Squidward Tentacles from SpongeBob SquarePants is practicing his clarinet like he normally does in the show. He can't concentrate because SpongeBob and Patrick are annoying him. He yells at them to leave him alone because he has an important clarinet concert that night. It then cuts to the concert where everyone in the audience had realistic bloodshot eyes. They are all staring at Squidward. They begin to boo him, and Squidward cries. It cuts again to Squidward crying on his bed. There are split-second images of dead children that flash on the screen. Squidward lowers his arms, and you see his eyes are bloody, and his tears are blood dripping down his face. Squidward puts a gun in his mouth as a demonic voice screams.
Do it.
The screen cuts to black. And then... In 1999, there was a Canadian public access show that a man used to watch growing up. The show was called Mr. Bear's Cellar, and was a show about a man in a bear costume as he lured kids into his basement to torture and sacrifice. Mr. Bear was believed to have been a child predator that filmed his actions on his own public access channel. There were other shows, too, like a low-budget show called Booby, about a hand on a table that went on strange adventures. In one gruesome episode, Booby is shown holding scissors and stabs another smaller hand on the table, while a quiet scream is heard off camera. The police eventually stopped the channel, which was being filmed in Mr. Bear's house. Mr. Bear, however, got away and is still out there somewhere. One night, an elderly man was murdered by an intruder. It was his crippled wife who called the police from the upstairs bedroom. The police arrive and find that there was no evidence of the intruder breaking in or out, leading the police to assume he was still somewhere in the house. An officer checked the downstairs, then went up where the wife was to check the upstairs. After another thorough look about, he still found no one. But then something clicks. If he hadn't been an experienced officer, he would have overlooked it. There was no phone upstairs. He drew his weapon only to see that the wife had fled, with only her wheelchair left at the top of the stairs. There is a mysterious creature that has been reported for almost 800 years in the United States. It is described as a hairless creature that resembles a dog, but was still humanoid. A husband and wife awoke one night to see the creature sitting at the foot of their bed. In an instant, the creature was suddenly a few inches from the husband's face, before it ran into their daughter's room. By the time they got into the room, their daughter was slashed apart. Her final words were, "He is the rake." This photo is the only supposed evidence of the creature. Blue. Not a very terrifying name for a monster, but I digress. A psychologist tries to rationalize a drug addict's dream of a horrifying monster he named Blue. He tries to think of a solution for what it is, but can't. He is curious and visits the patient's house, only to find him dead. Beside him were the words, "The end is the beginning." That night, he hears the beast that haunted his patient. It says Blue. The doctor began having horrible nightmares as well. He begins drinking. After visiting his patient's mother, he begins a quest to solve the mystery of his patient's death. He finds the patient's deceased father's journals and learns that he was attacked by Ublu too. He remembers the house in Louisiana the mother mentioned before, and using the journal goes to solve the mystery of Ublu. But now he was seeing Ublu when he was awake, out of the corner of his eyes. A challenge is offered to whoever can survive a night in the no-end house. The reward is a shitload of money, so a man agrees to try it. Each room was different, filled with traps and torture devices, and each one got worse and worse. After a night of absolute terror, the man discovers that he can never leave the no-end house, because the rooms began to repeat. If any of you have not seen this internet creepypasta, you should go look up the video on YouTube. Pause and go watch it. I know this creepypasta isn't well known, but I think it's one of the best video pastas there are. Because it isn't just a lost episode creepypasta with loud screams and shit. It's also not that creepy, but it will leave you wondering. The story revolves around a man's journey to solve an internet mystery. I won't spoil anything, so go watch it, and you'll be surprised it's not higher on the list. There's actually a lot of theories revolving around the ending, but see it for yourself. And now here's one that will give me the most hate. Yes, Jeff the Killer is the most overrated pasta on the site. Due to the fan community, this character has practically been ruined beyond fixing. But I think his impact on the site is worthy of placing him as high as I do on the list. And let's face it, when you first saw the picture, it terrified you. Be honest. Well, at least it freaked me out, and was actually the first creepypasta I ever read. That picture alone made me find creepypastas. The story goes that a kid who gets bullied gets burnt up and then kills them. He then cuts his face and then cuts his own eyelids off so he can never sleep. Oh, and he also murders his entire family, saying his infamous catchphrase, "Go to sleep." The story concludes saying he is still out there. A father notices his son is addicted to online video games and takes it upon himself to teach his son about online safety. He would normally tell his son stories in order to teach him lessons, but he warned his son this story was scary. His son didn't care, so he told it to him. The story was about another little boy who didn't care about online safety, and he shared his information to what he thought was another little boy online. That night, while waiting to be tucked in by his parents, he hears a strange noise downstairs. He calls out for his dad. Suddenly, his dad's head appeared in the doorway. "Yeah, son?" The voice was different. His father's head was in a different angle than it should have been, and his mouth never moved when he spoke. The son was weirded out when his mother's head appeared below his father's. Her voice was the same as his father's, and her mouth didn't move either. His parents, in a mocking voice, told the son that he should have been careful online, because the little boy he met was a grown man that broke into the house and killed them. A man stepped into the room holding his parents' severed heads. The man tortured the boy for hours until he eventually died. The man was about to leave when he heard a baby crying in the next room. The man goes in there to kill the baby as well, until he sees him crying in the crib. He is so affected by the crying baby that he couldn't kill it, and instead decided to raise him as his own, and named him William. The father telling the story noticed his son was really scared. His son looked at him and stammered, "But Dad, my name is William." A man, his cousins, and his friends were out camping at a cabin. He and his friends remained at the camp, while one of his cousins and his friend went off in the woods. Suddenly, they get the smell of blood, and the group that went in the woods come hurrying back, horrified, and they all hide out in a trailer. One of the cousins is about to go outside to put out the fire, but is stopped by one of the scared friends who tells them they saw a creature chasing them. A friend of theirs is a native of the woods and tells them that it is the Goat Man, a creature that can shapeshift and is bad luck if you run into him. They remain inside with the odd smell of blood that appears and dissipates every so often. Eventually they get brave and go outside again. But the next day, after hearing some spooky campfire stories, they smell blood again. They get the feeling something is wrong, and return to the cabin. They begin to fight about stupid stuff, being trapped in a small space with each other, until one of the girls screams, and the door was hanging wide open. The man realizes something truly terrifying now. There are only 11 of them now. No one had noticed that an extra person had been with them, most of them being friends of his cousins. No one had realized that someone had slipped into the group and was with them for an entire night. They locked the door, and the girl who screamed said she finally noticed there was an extra person. And that's when the person next to her grabbed her leg and uttered something and fled. The people grouped together for the night, and everyone goes to sleep. The main character wakes up, and it's not quite light yet, and he tells the 4 people who want to leave, and whoever wants to stay can stay. So now, there were 7 left. One cousin goes to find a gun, but doesn't return. Then someone says they see the girl that had left standing outside the trailer. They smell blood again. One of the girls go out to see her. Her back was turned, and she was laughing. So that girl backed up inside the trailer. One person is set to watch her from the window till they hear a bang on the door that freaks them out. Another friend pulls the man aside to tell him that there are 7 of them again. How could that be? His cousin hadn't returned with the gun yet. The girl laughing outside was gone. Everyone else remembers there being 8 of them. The native of the woods says his cousin is coming to pick them up. The friend's cousin arrives. He asks why he smells blood and where the girl is. They ask what he means, and he says he ran into one of their friends in the woods that then followed behind him, staring at him all the way until he turned around and she was gone. The rest of them sit around and talk nervously until they go to sleep. The smell of blood is overwhelming, and they hear bangs and scratches at the door. They grab guns. The creature outside speaks. "Let me the fuck in. Stop playing." For 15 minutes, it orders them to open. They hear it moving around, then it comes back to the door to speak. It does this until one of the cousins grabs a gun and goes outside. He fires shots into the air and orders it to leave in the name of Jesus. And when he retreats into the trailer again, they hear nothing but screams till the morning. He tells the man, sometime after the story, that while he was standing guard, he saw someone come out of the bathroom and lay down to go to sleep with the others. He counted them. There were 9 people now. He didn't want to shoot at it, because if it didn't die, it would surely kill them all. So he just watched it the rest of the night. Sometimes it would stand up and giggle, then lay back down. Everyone was packed up and were leaving that morning. The cousin ran up to the man and said that there was a window in the bathroom, and it was open. The thing had been crawling through the window and pretending to be one of them the whole time. They were now walking with it. The creature looked him dead in the eyes, then just turned and walked back into the woods. A group of kids in a neighborhood are gathered together to play flashlight tag. Though it was against the rules, many kids would hide in the woods. The writer being one of them. When he saw a flashlight, he ran for the woods to hide. The light hit his face, but the person didn't say anything. He just stared at him. He started approaching him. The kid had a bad feeling, so he ran. He looked back and saw it was an adult chasing him, not a child. When he lost the man, the kid snuck out of the woods as the strange man continued looking for him. When he got out, he was tagged by one of the kids who was playing the game still. He tried to warn him not to run into the woods, but the kid thought he was just playing the game. The writer went back later to see if he could find the man again, but couldn't, so he went back to playing. A few minutes later, he finds one of the neighborhood girls hiding behind a tree in the woods, but she seemed a bit off to him. The other kids started telling her to get out of the woods, but then they heard footprints going deeper into the trees. By this point, the game was over, so he got her father to come out and look for her. Police were called, and they looked for her too. They found her 2 days later. She was stuffed in a drain pipe after being stabbed multiple times. The kids were told never to play flashlight tag again. A man is trying to find some information about an old show he used to watch, called Candle Cove. He can't recall the network it was on, but remembered it was on a local station and was very low budget. He stumbles on a forum site called Fan Nostalgia. There, he finds other users who remember the show as well. They begin talking about what they can remember about it, and turn up some disturbing memories. The show was about a little girl named Janice as she goes on a pirate adventure with her cowardly friend Pirate Percy aboard a talking ship called the Laughingstock. The show also had one of the creepiest villains for a kid show, a skeleton named the Skin Taker, who made a cape of his victim's skin. His mouth moved side to side instead of up and down, and when asked about why his mouth does that by Janice, the creature replied, "To grind your skin." There was an episode they remembered where all the characters were just screaming at the camera for hours. One of the users on the forum asks his mother about the show, and his mother remembered it too. However, she says that it was odd that at about 4 o'clock every day after school, he would turn the TV on and stare at nothing but static. This is probably the most terrifying and well-known gaming creepypasta on this list. A man named Judiciable uploaded videos about his experience with a possessed Legend of Zelda game. Majora's Mask is already known as being a terrifying game that was made even more terrifying, with a statue of Link that continually appears behind him as he plays, along with the Song of Healing being played backwards. Anytime Judiciable tried to complete the game normally, he would die unexpectedly, with a death message saying, "You've met with a horrible fate, haven't you?" The next time he logs on, the name of the profile, Ben, he was playing on, changed to the word drowned. He interprets this to mean the spirit of a boy named Ben drowned, and now his spirit has possessed the game. Judiciable hasn't posted another video, so we don't know where the rest of the story will go. The SCP Foundation is sort of like the Men in Black of the creepypasta world. The Foundation was created to keep supernatural, unexplainable, and harmful creatures and items from the public. Some SCPs are more dangerous than others, like SCP-173, who kills you when you aren't looking at it, or SCP-96, that kills you if you look at it. Don't get the two confused, obviously. Some are funny, like SCP-1545, which is a llama. Yeah, you can tell there are many stories about each SCP in captivity, which are for the most part scary, but there is a lot. If you have about 3 weeks of free time and nothing to do, you should read them all. Smile Dog is one of the most famous chain letter tales. If you don't know, a chain letter is one of those spam emails you get from time to time saying if you don't forward this, you'll meet with misfortune. Smile Dog, however, is a little bit different. The first image you'll receive is this picture. It will give you a certain number of days to pass it along. If you fail to do so, this image will replace it. You'll then either commit suicide, go insane, get dragged into the picture, or get killed by the smile dog. Reports vary. If you ever get this email, you'd better spread the word. A cruel doctor named Zimmerman wanted to prove the existence of the unseen and hired 15 other scientists and 3 test subjects in Alaska, one of them being the writer. Using his wealth, he created an underground bunker, which was built to prevent anything from escaping. There was one way in and out. The complex was built like a maze. Each room had a camera, which anyone could use to see any room at any time in their monitors. The experiment was to study the effects of isolation on a human, but the true purpose was to prove the existence of the metaphysical. Zimmerman's theory was that he could open a portal and channel the energy into one of the test subjects. Using a fluid he created, he would inject it in the person to keep the spirit from leaving. The experiment had to be performed on humans, because humans had the power of will. Somehow he was able to make it so that only 3 spirits would appear, only in the rooms with the test subjects, and only 1 spirit per room. The subjects selected had no family or friends who needed the money Zimmerman offered them for the experiment. When the experiment officially started, everyone was in the control room together. The complex began to shake, and the monitors in the subjects' rooms turned to static. The subjects began to scream. Zimmerman released the scientists for a night. The next day, the scientists were on edge. They looked at the monitors, and Cam 1 and 3 were still static, but Cam 2 showed the woman subject on her back with a frozen expression on her face. Angry, Zimmerman shut Cam 2 off and said 1 and 3 didn't come back on. He would send the security team to see what's up. Cam 3 came on, and instead of the subject stood a creature in the subject's clothes, and it stared at the camera. Its eyes were black, and the head was large with no hair. Cam 1 never turned back on, so the security team were sent to Subject 1's room. They opened the door, the creature escaped, and the camera turned to static. Only gunfire and screams could be heard. The creature was killed, but many security personnel were killed as well. Subject 3 kept staring at the camera. For some reason, Tiny Tim songs started playing throughout the complex. There was no source, and people became irritated. The ground quaked again. Suddenly, it was realized that Subject 3 had escaped. Everyone went crazy, throwing people off the ladder to escape. The song returned and grew before stopping. The door opened, and the song blasted, and Subject 3 appeared in the doorway. It grabbed Zimmerman and ripped him into 2. The writer ran to the ladder as the creature began ripping people apart. He climbed to the top, knowing he couldn't allow the creature to escape. So he permanently sealed the lid, allowing the creature to tear his colleagues apart. The story ends with the escaped scientist hearing Tiny Tim in the distance, getting closer. A group of scientists wanted to prove the existence of God. and believed that our 5 senses clouded our connections with him. A man with nothing to lose volunteers for the experiment. They take away all his senses, and the man starts to see and hear ghosts, even though he was now blinded and deaf. He begins naming some of the scientists' dead loved ones. Eventually, the man goes insane. Before he dies, he says, "I have spoken with God, and he has abandoned us." This story is quite relatable, considering we're living in a world where people ignore reality to live in their own fantasy. A man questions his sanity in his empty apartment building after being away from human interaction for a long time. Things he sees start changing. People he used to know seem unfamiliar and vague. Even his apartment starts to change around him. He tries to leave the apartment, but fear overpowers him each time. He tries to rationalize each incident he encounters. He realizes he hasn't seen a human face for longer than he can remember. He receives an email from some unknown person saying something is trying to control people, and not to trust his eyes. He thinks it's odd, but tries not to think about it. He manages to contact a friend from childhood. As he writes about his friend, somehow she arrives. He asks her if it's really her, but she replies with the same story he just wrote about her. He freaks out when he realizes his webcam had turned somehow to face the story he had just wrote about her. He realizes that something is changing as he remembers stuff or people to fit his memory to keep him in a cloud of disillusion. He smashes all of his electronics, and he becomes skeptical and paranoid of everything. A psychologist and police officer appear at his door and explain that there has been an outbreak of psychosis across America, triggered by an email someone sent. The man believes them and is about to answer at first, but then questions them as well. He believes that he is one of a few people left alive that is hiding from some unseen entity, trying to control the few who have evaded it. The story then jumps a few days into the future, where the man is in a psychiatric hospital now. He blinded himself in order to better see the illusions. Now that his hearing is heightened, and now he can hear the entity faking conversations and friends. A doctor reads what the blind patient wrote and smiles. He realizes the man is clearly crazy. No sane man would be able to see through their illusions. He respects the human for putting up quite a battle against them. But unfortunately, he has to walk into a cell each day and tell the man he's wrong. He wishes he could tell him that they are trying to deceive him, but he doesn't. This is the story that gave me nightmares. A boy and his family move into a new house. While there, the boy meets a little creature named Mr. Widemouth that wants to be his friend. However, some nights Mr. Widemouth would act strange asking him if he knew how to juggle, so he brought him knives to practice. And another time, Mr. Widemouth tries to convince the boy that if he jumps out of a window, a trampoline will appear and bounce him right back up. The boy begins to be creeped out by Mr. Widemouth. When he tells his parents, they believe Mr. Widemouth is just an imaginary friend. One day, Mr. Widemouth and the boy go for a walk. Mr. Widemouth says, "One day, when you're ready, you can go down that path." Soon the boy, thankfully, moves to another house again. In the car on the way leaving, the boy looks up at the attic window and sees Mr. Widemouth smiling and holding knives. A few years later, the boy is older now and decides to visit that old house again. While there, he decides to go down the path Mr. Widemouth told him about. When he walks down the path, he sees a graveyard. All the graves belong to children. Obviously, Slenderman is number one. Can you think of another creepypasta that has branched out beyond its original story and has reached pop culture status? Everyone knows Slenderman. Stories, games, and even real-life sightings. Nothing on the Creepypasta website has had a greater mark on the real world than this one. It's inspired countless other stories on the site, along with many successful and less successful games, and even inspired a real-life crime where two stupid middle school girls tried to fucking kill their friend to summon him. I mean, yeah, they are pretty fucking stupid, but Slenderman is such a mysterious creation, it leaves you wondering if such a beast could exist. If you don't know anything about him, he's a tall, white, faceless creature in a suit that snatches people and children and transports them to a strange forest or purgatory. It is actually unknown where exactly he takes you, so don't get caught by him. Sometimes he takes your organs out and hangs them from trees. Sometimes he gets his proxies to kill you. He can haunt you like a ghost. He can drive you insane. He can disguise himself as a tree. He can even wipe your memories. He can teleport and make your greatest fears shown to you. His origin is unknown. His intentions are unknown. He is probably the most fear-inducing fictional character ever conceived, because he can get you at any time, and there is no stopping him. If he wants you, he takes you. End of story. And that is why Slenderman is the best creepypasta character of all time. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I will hopefully be getting back to regular uploads. Yeah, and as you can probably tell, I'm making a few new changes to this channel. So yeah, keep an eye out. I should have a new video out by next month, hopefully. And I think you guys are gonna like it. It's a theory video. So yeah, I hope you guys have a spooky Halloween. And if there's any creepypastas that you want me to cover next time, if I ever make a part 2 to this, let me know. As always, like, subscribe, and stay alive, you guys.
Slenderman, he's always doing the best he can. Just don't let the song get stuck in your head, or he'll show up tonight at the end of your bed. And no one needs Slender without ending up dead.